Hello, welcome back. If you're just joining, it's the Day Break newspaper review segment. It's that segment of the program where we get to take a look at stories that made it to the front page of national dailies. As is customary, I always have the Daily Trust with me to kickstart the review. Lead story on the Daily Trust says, reps in Rowdy session over tax reform bills. Yes, you remember I mentioned earlier about the tax reform bill and some of the controversies that it's been causing over the course of the week. Proposals scale second reading in Senate. Top of the page, abductors of toddler siblings demand 300 million naira ransom. Tinubu pitches investments in food security, solid minerals, others. Nigeria slumps in latest FIFA ranking. Also, influential leaders move to resolve ACF crisis. And at the bottom of the page, we see other stories there, such as this one that says police killed 24 during end bad governance protest. This is according to Amnesty International. Marketers lift 251 million liters of petrol from Dangote refinery in 10 weeks. Court sacks Benue APC caretaker committee. We now go to the Punch newspaper. Lead story there says minimum wage. Labour, states hold last-minute talks ahead Monday strike. NLC mobilizes for total shutdown. States hopeful of beating December 1 deadline. All the stories there says tax. Northern senators regroup. Bill scales second reading. NAFDAC mops up fake malaria drugs. Page 12 has that story. Also, Tinubu seeks France collaboration on food security education. Money laundering. US-based Nigerian may get 20-year jail term. Suspected herdsmen kill Ogun chief on farmland. And on job creation not part of my mandate, says Labour Minister. Well, these are some of the stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper. We now go to the Guardian. Lead story, the big story on the Guardian says World AIDS Day, rising spread, more HIV infected kids, slow race to zero scourge. And this big story has an infographic which gives details of this. It says about 140,000 Nigerian children are currently infected by HIV. 22,000 new mother-to-child transmission of HIV is recorded yearly. Nigeria contributes 25% of the global burden of HIV mother-to-child transmission, contributes 46% of new infections among kids in the West and Central Africa, 18% of global figure. 35% gets pediatric treatment as against global set standard of 95%. 15,000 deaths recorded among children yearly, 300 of which occur weekly. This is the infographic that captures the big story on the Guardian. Other stories. Senate moves forward with tax reform bills as critical call for caution. Shun migration. FG tells fresh foreign trained medical doctors. Witness tell court how he collected $400,000 from Emefiele. Global wages outgrowing inflation, says ILO. And other stories says Amnesty International accuses police of killing 24 protesters in Kano. Others. Emphasis on individual success weakens political action, says Oshibajo. Electricity subsidies skewed against masses, minister affirms. Well, these are some of the stories on the front page of the Guardian newspaper. We'll be coming back to the studio now, where I have joining me this morning for analysis and sharing perspectives on these developments, the editor of the 21st Century Chronicle, talking of no other than Malam Nuruddin Abdullah. Editor, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Nice to have you, Mr. Fagel.
So we have a very, very shouty lead on the Daily Trust. Talk about a Rowdy session over the tax reform bills. Now, we had a conversation, a light one, about this last week. I mean, are you surprised of the direction that this argument has taken, especially bearing in mind that, I mean, it was just passed for second reading yesterday on the floor of the Senate, which means it could mean that quite a majority of those who have formed opinions on this bill may not have even read, the bill itself.
I think that's correct, particularly if you look at the mission. The entire argument is it has taken, or rather the northern governors in particular, have majorly sectionalized.
Indeed. Now, while you have this conversation, perhaps the director can pull up some bullet points from the bill. I think we have that, so that this gives some sort of perspective to what you're saying. But then go ahead.
Exactly. So, you know, the Kaduna meeting, the traditional rulers, the Abuja meeting, then subsequently the NEC, the National Economic Council meeting. We are majorly people, governors from the southeast and some other non-viable southern states, you know, gang up with the north to mount an opposition. But my thinking is this. Yes, the presidency, President Tinubu in particular, you can say he didn't do, there are things that he would have done before sending the bills to the National Assembly, particularly the NEC. The NEC comprises of all the governors, the ministers of relevant economy-related agencies and ministries. I think maybe he would have presented the bills to them. Mr. Tayo Adedeji, the reform, the tax reform.
Tayo Oyedele, he's supposed to, I mean...
Exactly. He would have briefed the NEC.
Yes, indeed.
And, you know, clarify most of the gray areas. And more importantly, you know, a man is an enemy of what he doesn't know. Just, I had a discussion. I said, what are you afraid? The issue is this. Whether this bill scales through, which it you will scale through, yes. Despite the Rowdy session, you know.
It feels skilled second reading.
Is one significant thing that the governors, particularly from the northern part of the country, should know is this. We are reaching this stage. Fiscal federalism. Look at the NBS data on IGR for 2023. If you remove, let's say in the north in particular, if you remove, let's say, Zamfara state, that improved its IGR by 200 and over 40%. Yeah, you can say, you know, when you have somebody with, you have an educated governor, functioning education for that matter, you understand? And some few others, the entire IGR landscape in the north has nosedived. Why? Because of the subsidy removal and the spike in the FAC allocation that these governors do have now. Governors who hitherto were receiving 3 billion monthly are now receiving up to 10 billion. And with due respect to most of them, if you go to most of the states, look at the poverty index. Go back to the same NBS data. Is it decreasing or ballooning?
It doesn't quite reflect.
Look at the infrastructure side. Very few states, you know, when you go, it's not, yeah, something is happening. Yeah, there are some of these governors that have turned their state capitals and some major towns into construction sites. It's visible. This money from Abuja will not last forever. Whether Tinubu succeed in passing these reforms bills or not, we will reach this stage.
Whether we like it or not.
That's the fact. You remember when Buhari came, international crude prices were down. Governors could not even pay salaries.
And then the bailout.
They were not even crediting what the commercial banks were no longer giving them bank drafts. Then there were a series of bailouts with conditions by Kemi Adeosun at that time, even though most of the governors have violated the condition. So the truth now is this. Must the governor, whether are you in Kano, Kaduna, Yobe, what have you, is this. Whether you like it or not, these are reality. What are you doing to attract these companies that are based in the southwest to your state? With due respect to, look at what Erufai, I'm not a fan of Erufai, yes, that's a fact. But despite the banditry in the last 4 years of his administration, he managed, we don't know how, to attract some investment into Kaduna. Some people came and invested their money. The state created jobs, the state gets revenue and what have you. That is the way to go. They want state police, and you don't want VAT, derivation-based VAT. No, you want local government autonomy. Look at what happened now. They impose all their candidates. In some areas, some of the governors were so magnanimous, they dash out some of the seats. And what if you can't eat your cake and have it again. We have to look inward and tap all these untapped potentials so that we can be economically viable. If tinubu will succeed definitely with these reforms, I tell you. There's very little they could do to stop it.
Okay, Editor, now talking about reforms. So it's no news that the president is currently in France on what some would call an investment visit. But then, are you skeptical, or do you have any worry or concern that the president has been, over the course of the last year that he assumed office, been focused on France? I mean, I think of all of the countries that the president has traveled to in the course of the last 1 year, he has visited France the most. Then we talk about the United Kingdom. And this is coming at a time when we have countries like Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali wanting to cut ties with France. Do you have any worry over this?
I'm not an international relations expert, but there's a cause to worry. He's the chairman of ECOWAS. And what happened in Niger, Mali, Burkina, and even some other countries, particularly in their relation with their former colonial master. You can follow them. They are inside the trenches and they know the hit they receive, particularly in the colonial master, all these colonial legacies.
You don't think it's an irony that they are saying they've had enough when Nigeria is saying we want more?
Unfortunately, even after the military coups in this country, Nigerian foreign policy, due respect to whoever, is in shambles.
Why do you say that?
Yeah, look at how we approach the issue. We use our last cards as the first. We threaten military intervention. At a time we are struggling financially and militarily. You understand? And look at what happened. We ended up being a laughing stock. But they have moved on. All the conditions we gave them, they did not accede to any.
Yet.
We opened the borders. In fact, remember what happened. When we opened the border, it took them about 2 or 3 weeks to open theirs.
To respond.
So the issue is simple like this house, I say, when you don't give somebody food, he must eat now.
Indeed.
There are alternatives, you understand?
Another means.
So the way the Nigeria in particular, as the big brother in Africa, handled the issue, they really mess it up. And even when we threatened military intervention, you remember the opposition, the swelling of opposition, north, south, and what have you. We think that we are doing at the beginning of France. Whether we like it or not, our relationship, African countries' relationship with France is not nice, so to say, economically, militarily, and what have you. So, what the president is doing, yes, if the investment things he was talking about, will benefit us, let be it. But you should know that he is the head of ECOWAS, and we have our neighbors. Look at what is happening with Chad now. Indeed. Chad is threatening to pull out of the multinational joint task force, which is headquartered in Jamina. You remember what Chad did at the peak of Boko Haram? Their soldiers went to where ours could not. They really helped us.
Indeed.
And when you are not in good time with your neighbors, with terrorism now taking a global dimension, you push them, they go into it, and they look back. So, our foreign policy must be sharpened, and it should be specific in tackling our issues, not doing the building of one foreign power. You understand? Nigeria is big enough to decide for itself But unfortunately, even our neighbors no longer respect us because the way we see how we cut off
I mean, we
the
saw what happened with
whimsicalities of.
xenophobia. It happened in South Africa. It happened, it even got to Ghana at some point. So what really needs to be
We
done?
don't. Certain countries, Egypt is one. There are just some Pan-African fellowships across all sectors. I participated in about 2 of them. They take you and you see the country. Nigeria is not doing that. When we are dealing with you, Nigeria will be dealing with the head of the hunter. So by the time his people are tired of him, they send him out. The perception of Nigeria as a country, as a big country, in those countries we do help, is mostly negative. Because they see us as sustaining some dictators or what have you. We intervene. Any country in the world that is intervening directly or indirectly in all this, they have what they will get in return.
Indeed.
But Nigeria is the only country that will just, we are doing things like without anything to get for it.
Indeed.
In fact, look at, lastly, even in some regional issues, we pick Nigeria as our candidate for this ECOWAS, whatever. Some smaller countries will gang up and say no, and nothing will happen.
Indeed. Well,
so we have to really resharpen our.
I think we should do that. But then we, unfortunately, as we're talking about resharpening our foreign policies, we also have to consider that we've overshot time this morning. Editor, thank you so much for always, taking our call and being here in the studio to do the analysis and sharing perspectives, on the stories that made it to the front page of the paper. It's always a pleasure. Yes, indeed. And that wraps up Daybreak this morning. If you followed any part or missed any part of the program, you can follow us across all of our social platforms and also catch our live stream on YouTube and also Facebook to get more on news, programs, and of course documentaries. From me, thank you so much for being a part of the program. Have a lovely weekend. Up next is 360 Sports with Adeni Ajishafedu. Stand by for that at the top of the hour.